arms, I feel someone come and stand next to me. So he's got his arm around me, and this deep voice in my ear says, "You're going to be fine. Calm down." And I'm looking down kind of at my shoes. There are no shoes next to me. There is not somebody standing next to me that I can see.
This is Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide and we see God. We see his hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, like in this episode. Divine interventions, like in this episode. Near-death experiences, big and little, God incidents, prophetic dreams, visions. It's all here on Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. Episode 190. There's Tresa looking down. There's someone talking to her and no shoes, just socks. Kidding. What's there? An angel. An angel. And we were trying to describe, my wife and I were thinking about this episode. How do you describe this angel? Gallant came to mind, or Gallant, if you will, what this angel does. And again, you may be alone right now, and you're not. There you are. It's just you and me, right? And it's not. It's you and your angel, me and my angel, right? So we always have our angels. They're always listening to our prayers.
God is all around us if we choose to see him and providing for us when we don't even really know it.
Oh, and how's your first name pronounced? This is a very interesting spelling here. Teresa, kinda.
It's Tresa, like a tree outside. You can thank my mom for that, but it's Tresa.
Okay, so she decided not to use the first E, no H's, just Tresa.
Exactly. She thought she'd be creative and make it a conversation piece for my entire life.
Tresa is originally from New Mexico, now living in Nashville.
A crazy, fabulous city that is growing by leaps and bounds. Everybody wants to be in Nashville. They're moving from New York, California. It's becoming the alternative entertainment base. Lots of folks live there that would never typically live in Nashville.
Yeah, because it's like you don't have to live in New York, Chicago, or LA to see all the entertainment that's out there.
That's right.
How did you happen to stumble upon us?
I think I was looking through just podcast topics and love hearing inspirational stories and things that motivate you in a positive way. There's so much negativity in the world. And this has been a couple years ago. So absolutely love it. It has been on the road with me, traveling from New Mexico to Nashville, back and forth, and long trips and listening to story after story after story, and confirms that God is all around us, that he speaks to us in different ways. And I think if you're willing to pay attention, when you listen to these stories, some are more obvious than others, but if you're willing to pay attention and not chalk it up to, oh, that was a cool coincidence, or, I was just thinking about you and you called me, those types of things, that's God talking to you. That's not just a, wonky coincidence. That's him speaking to you. And so many God winks, so many stories, as I've listened to your podcasts. It's amazing to me how a lot of people talk about keys, like actual car keys or door keys, or it's funny to me that there's, several key stories in my life. I actually have 3. The first one being in college. I was at a Christian, probably a weekend camp, college retreat camp at Glorieta, New Mexico, and had my college roommate with me. And it was just such a wonderful weekend. We were wrapping up the experience, and people had pulled up to the last location. I don't know if it was probably the lunch hall or wherever it was before we were leaving, and narrow driveways and parking spaces. And so we were kind of the last ones to pull up and block in several cars. When it was time to go, we could not find the keys. We absolutely could not find the keys, and they were supposed to be in a jacket pocket or purse pocket, somewhere of that nature, and they were just gone, absolutely gone. So it became, kind of a joke at first, and then it became frantic, and we realized this is a Sunday afternoon. People have to get home, they have to get back to school, they have to get on the road. It's just not even funny anymore. So we gathered together after we had frantically looked, and here you are at a Christian camp going, what do we do? Well, let's pray. Let's pray about it.
Isn't it funny how sometimes that's the last thing anybody, oh yeah. That's what they say to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's where we were. It's who we are. And it's like, okay, well, let's bow our heads and hold hands and pray about it. So we prayed about it. And as we closed the prayer, I opened my eyes and I walked over to my roommate, who was the one driving that car, walked over to my roommate's jacket that was hanging up, on a coat rack, was hanging up, and put my hand in her jacket pocket that we had checked 1,000 times before, and put my hand in the jacket pocket and pulled out the keys. And everyone just stood there with their mouths open of like, did you check that before? Yes, absolutely we did. So he delivered those keys. And that sat with me early on, as a college kid, that stayed with me to where I would tell that story in my early 20s. And I still tell it today. But in my early 20s, my roommate at the time, dear friend of mine, Jenny, she had heard that story, and she was having a moment of her own in our apartment, that she had the keys to a friend's house that contained dogs, trying to feed them, get them out. And the friend had taken a trip to the Bahamas. So she could not find the keys to the house to let these dogs out, to feed them, to care for them. And just thought, what am I going to do? Am I going to have to break into this house? Am I going to have to call her in the Bahamas and figure out how to get into this house? What am I going to do? And so I was reminded of my key story in college. And I said, let's pray about it. Let's pray. Let's just stand here for a moment, bow our heads and pray about it. So we did. And as we were coming to the close of the prayer, I kid you not, we heard, and the key hit the carpet. It was a thud. The key hit the carpet. Neither of us saw it because our heads were bowed and our eyes were closed. And so as we prayed, we turned around, about to close. We turned around and looked at the carpet, and there was the key that had landed on the carpet. It was not brushed off from a counter or brushed off from, it was in the middle of the carpet, had not been, elbowed off and, knocked it in the floor. Absolutely not. It had been delivered. It was delivered. Here you go. Here's the key. Those dogs need help. Because we trusted that he would provide it. And I mean, boy, that was a big one for us. She was literally speechless. Probably, didn't have as strong as faith, but she knew my key story. So she stood there and, prayed with me, and then the key was delivered. So
isn't that cool? Isn't that just the coolest darn thing to see God act
absolutely.
like that?
Absolutely. That one was significant because it was just so obvious. And then the third one happened to me this year. I was working on a wedding, and we were running around trying to produce a very high profile wedding. And my team, I had a strategic partner that was working with me, and my team was there, and I needed to leave. And I'd had a rental car to load and, pack up a bunch of stuff. And so I could not find the keys to the rental car. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. I'm going to have to Uber and get a bunch of stuff in the Uber car and go down to the reception and haul it. It just was a nightmare. And I've told these key stories in the past enough that my strategic partner, who I do a lot of work with, she knew the story. So she could see me kind of coming unglued. I was absolutely just having a meltdown, mortified that I'd have to, leave my car there, do this, explain it to our clients. And so finally, I had just kind of given up. I didn't know what to do. And I'd looked 100 times, and I walk into the room where the key would have been. And there it sat on the coffee table in the main room where I had looked, so many times before, and the key sat there.
Yeah.
And I turned around and I just was speechless. And I thought, okay, who played this joke on me? Who did this to me? And no one had any clue. It was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about. Turned around and looked at her, and I said, here's the keys. And she said, yeah, I prayed about it. Now, I hadn't prayed about it. Of course, I'm having a meltdown, had forgotten to even stop and say, Lord, I need these keys. She knew my stories. She prayed about it. And she turned around and said, absolutely, I prayed about it. I know your key stories.
I know.
So,
So I think we had an episode that I think the title was, "Did you think to pray?" Because we we hit those crises, right smack in the middle of the crisis when we should be going, to heaven first. It's like sometimes it becomes the last thing, but I don't have time to pray. I'm looking for a key.
absolutely. And that's really, I was in work mode. I mean, I was tunnel vision in work mode and didn't even have time. I was trying to solve it instead of pausing and letting God solve it. Yeah. And that's what she did. So she knew, she was inspired by my stories of those two other key stories. And so she prayed and here it appeared.
And God teaches us so beautifully with that. He so beautifully teaches us. And others are hearing this too, is that, I got to remember to pray. When I lose, I got to remember to pray. Sometimes it's the last place we go. And so he does this, that thing on the carpet and all that. He does this just so there's such an emphatic exclamation mark on pray. I'm actually listening at all times. I'm actually listening.
That is so true. God really is the key.
Amen.
I'm just reminded by that.
Yeah. All right. Where to from here?
Well, another significant one was a work trip. I was traveling to Chicago and I had a work colleague with me and we were in a Chicago, I think, diner, for lack of a better term. It was kind of a fun, maybe not far from Michigan Avenue and kind of had a diner feel to it. And we were sitting there just cutting up, having a good time, talking. And I'm very careful now not to laugh while you eat. So I had a French fry in my mouth and I just started laughing and inhaled, gasping for air and out of laughter because we were cutting up. And literally that entire French fry got stuck in my throat to where I truly was choking. And, people, until you've actually experienced choking, life-threatening choking, you can get something that goes down the wrong way or kind of coughing and choking, but truly choking, Heimlich maneuver choking, all pride goes out the window. You will do anything at that point to have this fixed. So I start to choke. And what's interesting to me, I stand up at this point. I stand up and I'm waving my arms in this booth in the diner. Trapper, not one person looked at me, changed their direction. It was like it was frozen in time. Everyone sat still. Everything was in slow motion. Everything froze in time. And my work colleague is very vocal. She's not shy. She would have jumped up and helped me or started screaming for help or something. Nothing happened. No one moved. And here I am standing up, waving my arms.
Does she have a theory on why she didn't jump up and help you?
She said afterwards she was frozen. She was absolutely frozen. And so as I'm waving my arms, I feel someone come and stand next to me, shoulder to shoulder. So we're lined up shoulder to shoulder, not face to face, shoulder to shoulder.
Like side by side?
Side by side.
Like looking in the same direction type feeling.
Correct.
Okay.
Looking the same direction. Your shoulders, one shoulder is touching, and then he puts that arm around me and grabs the other shoulder very tightly. So he's got his arm around me, standing side by side, looking the same direction. And this deep voice in my ear says, "You're going to be fine. Calm down. You have a little bit of air. If you stop breathing so heavy, you can make this work. And have a drink of water." Now, while this is being said to me, nobody is moving. No, there's no clamoring. There's nobody else coming over to help. There's not the manager jumping up. Nobody's doing anything except I can hear this voice. But what I can't process, there's multiple things going on. And what I'm having a hard time processing, but I can't focus on it, is that there's someone standing next to me and I'm looking down kind of at my shoes, listening. I'm trying to calm down and I'm listening. There are no shoes next to me. There is no pant legs next to me. There is not somebody standing next to me as I'm looking at my shoes. It is all empty space. There's not an actual person that I can see standing next to me, but the arm is around me, the voice is in my ear, and I pick up my water and I sip on the straw, and slowly do I feel the movement of the French fry. And then I sip a little bit more, and it's coming down my throat and burning, and it hurts. And so it's a process. And the entire time I feel this arm around me. So as it starts to go down and I calm down and now I can breathe, and I sit down to just collect myself, and I look, once I've sat down, I look to where this person should be standing. No one's there. I look at my work colleague, and everything unfreezes and goes back to normal. People are talking, dishes are clinking, silverware, orders being taken. No one has acknowledged that any of this has happened to me. Not one person's coming over, rushing over, saying, "Are you okay? What's going on?" If this person was literally a person there, they would have stayed. They would have checked on me. They would have said, "Are you okay? You feel better now? Do you need anything else?" They would have had a conversation eyeball to eyeball with me. But they didn't need to because I was fine. So when I looked at her and said, "What just happened?" she had an incredibly difficult time explaining it. She said, "I could not move. I was frozen, and I knew he was handling it." So she could see somebody. She could see him standing next to me because she needed to see him. I didn't need to see him. I experienced him, but she needed to see him so that she wouldn't get up and rush to go get somebody and interrupt what was happening. And nobody in that entire diner came to me to check on me or any comment of anything that ever happened to me. No one even acknowledged it, except she was frozen and could see him standing there making me calm down and making it okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're waving. You're trying to attract somebody. Nothing.
They
were frozen out. They were frozen out. Again, your friend experiencing something that they weren't supposed to do anything. Somehow this is being, this is when God does whatever God wants to do. And when he just takes over the scene, he takes over the scene. That's just remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I truly believe that God appears and uses people, and sends his angels to appear only to those who have to see them. He was also making a statement to me. He was calming her. He had to be, have that appearance to her so that she didn't get up and interrupt and cause commotion. She sat there and felt comfortable knowing that someone was helping me. But as I'm looking down and trying to breathe, I can't process the fact that there are no shoes, there are no pant legs, there's nobody standing next to me, but there is. So, I see that as such a blessing to be able to experience the fact that we do have God in our presence, and he sends his angels when needed. So many more times than we even ever know.
Yeah. Everyone, and who's ever listening, they got your angels right there. And I got to believe it's got to be so cool for an angel when they are called to do that and do something so physical that they can be heard, that the voice can be heard, that their hand can be felt on your right shoulder as they press against your left shoulder, and mind to mind, crawl inside your mind, inside the audio track somehow, and plant that directly into you of, you're fine.
Yep.
You're fine. Take a sip. You're fine. Wow.
Yep.
The only thing he didn't say was, fear not, as most angels do in the Bible. Fear, in his own way, he was saying, fear not,
Exactly right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, Tresa.
Yeah.
Wow.
From the key stories to this, choking in Chicago story, I've got others that there are large events like that one. And then there's small events, but they're all so meaningful at the time because there's a need happening at that time, big or small, that God gives us what we need exactly when we need it. Mm-hmm. And I am continually reminded of that. Continually.
Yeah, there's a prayer I every now and then pray, and it has to do with that providence of basically Jesus saying, I will give you what you need when you need it, not before, not after, exactly when you need it.
And that's true.
As far as your upbringing goes, faith in the home, not so much, back and forth, that kind of thing, like most of us, some of us?
No, I grew up in a Christian family, and we were raised Baptist, and so kind of a Southern Baptist approach. But I'm consider myself non-denominational, and but it's typically Baptist beliefs that are what I follow. I'm just very biblical upbringing.
So that's always kind of basically been there.
It has, yeah. I gave my life to Christ when I was 6 years old and was baptized on Easter Sunday shortly after. And so, it's always been part of my life. Faith has just, since I can remember, been part of my life.
Yeah. Okay. Give me some more stories. You got more, so go ahead. Whatever size story you got there.
I was busy working on an event, and it was just chaos and craziness, and everything went well. And we got home on a Sunday night and checked my calendar to make sure I knew what was going on for Monday so that there weren't any surprises. I looked at my Google Calendar, and there was an appointment on the calendar for 9:30 that next morning that I hadn't recognized. And it was put on the calendar by my assistant, and it had been no discussion about it. So I'm looking at my calendar. I'm dead tired. I would not have normally scheduled a meeting that next morning. And I look at that, and it's like, wait a minute, what is this meeting about? And who put this on the calendar? And what are we talking about? So I don't know, but I'm going to get up and get ready. And I didn't want to bother my team that night. So I got up the next morning and texted my assistant and said, do you know anything about this meeting? And the answer was no, I have no idea. And yet it was on her calendar, putting it on my calendar. It was like, what? So I just decided to go. So I walked in and literally said to the receptionist, I said, I have an appointment, and here's who it's with. And I don't really know what it's about, but I'm the owner of the company, and so I can talk about anything. It was a large organization that I had contacted in the past, hoping to work with them. But it'd been a while. It'd been probably a year and a half since I'd even contacted anybody over at that organization. And so she was busy, tied up with something else. They called back to the office and sent her assistant out. And she came out and said, hey, how can I help you? I don't know that we have anything on the calendar. And so she said, just come on back and let's figure this out. So I went back while the executive was in wrapping up a meeting, sat down with the assistant in that office, and they said, well, who are you and what do you do? And I explained what we do, and they said, oh, well, I'm sure that she wants to talk to you about this huge event that we're doing, and you're a high profile event producer, and I'm sure that's what we have, a huge need, and that's what she wants to talk to you about. I said, oh, okay, great. So she came in, sat down with me, still no idea how we got on the calendar, how I was there, why I was there, but we got into an exploratory discussion of who are you and what do you do? And it became oh my gosh, we have a huge need. We're planning this huge production. We are taking proposals right now, and we need help. Okay, great. All right, well, let me give you a proposal. So I walked out of there, and both of us were so confused. But as we closed that meeting, I looked at her. I said, do you believe in divine appointments? And she said, I absolutely do. And I said, I do too. And this was one of them.
Jeez, that's amazing.
And so, yeah. And so I go back. I'm determined, I'm determined to try to figure out what happened. How did this meeting get on my calendar? I should have just said, oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you for putting the appointment on my calendar. But of course, the human in me wants to know, how did this happen? So I go back to the office and 20 question everybody, and they have no idea. And then finally, I figure out that the entry in the calendar came from one of the people over at that company at the office inviting us, and it was a mistake of an autofill on the calendar because my assistant's name and her assistant's name were so close that they had emailed in the past about something else. And so when that person went to invite the assistant in that office, it ended up they clicked auto, like, oh yeah, that's who I want. And it came to us.
That's bizarre.
It came to our office, and it was the mistake of an autofill.
There's a message in this stuff, and you saw the message and trusted that there might be something there. Most of us just cancel it out like that's a mistake and don't go. And there is divine intervention in it. I mean, that's a great story.
If I had called them and said, hey, what is this appointment? They would have said, oh, that's a mistake, or I don't know, or it would have been canceled. The fact that I walked in the door and showed up and said, I have an appointment, that's the only way that it happened. And they are now one of my most favorite clients, and we do all kinds of incredible work together, and we have planned many, many events for them, and I absolutely adore them, and they're one of our best clients.
Wow. And you do events, that's what you do? Your thing is events?
We are high profile and celebrity events in Nashville, and then public relations. We do PR, branding, media campaigns, that type of stuff.
And it's your company?
Yes.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who knew? When you were a little girl, you said, that's what I want to do. I want to have a party all the time.
Well, yeah, I could go into detail. I've had people say, oh, you're a great party planner. It's like, yeah, it's a little more than that.
Yeah, but that's kind of where it starts. There's that little thing going on in there somewhere, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And now it's big things, big things. Wow. Okay. See how you see how you're building all of our trust in God, and that in divine intervention, and that when things happen, it's for a reason, and we're supposed to pray, and all these things. You're living it. You're living. Tell me, before we even go to the next story, how do you pray? What do you do?
I pray in the car on drive times, or I pray on my morning walk. But more than that, I almost feel like it's a conscious conversation rather than me thinking, oh, I need to stop and close my eyes and bow my head and pray. Certainly I do those, but for me, it's a continual conversation, as if you had someone sitting next to you and you might just have a quick, short sentence to say to them and then be on to the next thing. And so for me, I will converse with God throughout the day. Lord, I really need this, or Lord, explain this to me. Please give me the words to respond to this email, or, before we got on this call today, I prayed about it. I said, Lord, I need to be able to describe these stories accurately and correctly for you, for the benefit of you, that anyone listening may be inspired and touched by my experiences, because that's why he's provided them to me. It's not selfishly just for me. These experiences need to be told. Which is why I so appreciate your podcast, because it's really for the benefit of others. And, before getting on this call, I needed to say a little prayer and say, Lord, give me the right words, the right descriptions, the message you want me to share. This is you, not me.
Beautifully said. All right. What's our big wrap up here?
Okay. So the last one is just kind of the point of God has a great sense of humor. So in my college years, I was married in an abusive relationship, and luckily got out of that after a year and a half. And what was part of the story is that he played football and wanted to make it to the NFL, became injured, and just, the folks that make it to the NFL are so few and far between. So it's no surprise that, you've got these high school and college athletes that have big dreams and then they never come true. So his desire was to make it to the NFL. And I think he got angrier and angrier as he realized that it was never going to happen. So one of his favorite teams was the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Oilers, because we lived in New Mexico at the time and didn't have an NFL team in New Mexico. And so it was the Texas teams that he really followed and watched and enjoyed. So I moved from New Mexico to Nashville in 95, I guess. and I moved to pursue a career in music. There's just a lot of behind the scenes, cutthroat, just harsh decisions. And so for me, it did not take me long. It was like, yeah, probably not.
Yeah. I've heard it said that if it's really important in people's lives to fail quickly. And that's not a negative. It's just an awareness that no, and fail quickly and then move to the next thing.
It didn't take me long to be turned off by the industry. And so that was really a blessing because then I could close that door. And so I had a wonderful opportunity to work for some incredible companies. One day I was approached by an NFL team that was moving from Houston to Nashville. And I was working for a music industry company there and working in community relations. So I was approached to consider working for the NFL. And I had never considered that. I wasn't a huge football fan. It wasn't anything I was really interested in. But as the Houston Oilers became the Tennessee Titans, then I was being called to take over their community relations department.
That's amazing.
And so I did that. And so Trapper, I went to work for the Titans and I worked with them for 11 years, handling community and player relations and working with these athletes in making an impact and making a difference in the Nashville community, as well as their hometown communities. And what that did for me was redeem what my heart wanted to say, I'll never have anything to do with another athlete as long as I live. When I went through a tough divorce in an abusive marriage and said, I closed that door, I literally drove out of town. And I remember telling my mom, I will never have anything to do with an athlete as long as I live. And here I was years later, working for one of the very teams that he wanted to play for. God has a great sense of humor. They did not hire me to coach that team because I knew nothing about football. They did not hire me to coach that team. They hired me to care about them. And because of that, because I worked with them and worked for the NFL for over a decade, then I was able to start my own company and truly make an impact in the work that we do, whether it's public relations, whether it's events, whether it's, raising money for the community and working with nonprofits and still many of these athletes and celebrities that live in Nashville. God has a great sense of humor because I would have never back in the day thought that would come full circle.
What a great story. And without the Titans, obviously that's the springboard to where you are right now. All that,
correct.
With all that you learned there. And I'm sure your ex heard about this.
Don't you know?
Don't you know?
For me, it's less about him. It's more about the reconciliation for me, is that I was able to reconcile that, saying to my mom so many years ago, I'll never have anything to do with an athlete as long as I live. It wasn't about the athlete. It was about, abuse has no demographic, an abusive relationship doesn't have to be about an athlete. And I was putting it in that bucket for me at that time. And so to be able to reconcile that, I sat in the office for so many years and talked to these guys about what do you want your legacy to be? When it's all said and done, are you, so many yards on the field? Are you all about touchdowns? How many sacks you had? Or are you about so much more than that? When you're on your deathbed, what do you want your legacy to be? And so from that, that's what I named my company. My company is all about legacy. It's legacy PR and events.
Legacy PR events?
Yep. Every day we work on what is your legacy? Every day. Still doing it.
Love your spirit, girl. I love it.
Thank you.
I always like to ask, what's the takeaway in all of this from from Keys to the NFL and everywhere in between and events and what was the middle? Oh, yeah, choking and everything else and angels. What's our takeaway in all this? How do you want to be remembered? What's your legacy PR in all of this as we look back on this episode?
I think what sums it up is that truly God is all around us if we choose to see him. He does incredible works all around us and protecting us and providing for us when we don't even really know it. And he is all around us. He is blessing us in ways that we do not even know. And my hope that anybody listening to this would open their eyes and say, okay, God, what do you have for me today? What can I acknowledge today? And to not even think about, oh, that's a coincidence, or how funny is that? That's interesting. Nope. Give it to God. Allow him the credit that, I was just thinking about you and you called me. Nope. That was because you're supposed to talk to them. I always think it's, important to acknowledge a God wink. How else is he going to communicate? When you have an appointment on your calendar that God has put there, go.
Yep. Sometimes wrong turns are not wrong turns. There's all kinds of things that happen in life. They really are.
Exactly.
I saw that, about the same time you're contacting me, you joined the Patreon family as well. God bless you. I so appreciate that. Can I ask you why?
Well, because your message needs to be heard. It needs to keep going. It needs, I think of non-believers that may just turn on your podcast out of curiosity, and they may switch over and go, okay, maybe I'll listen to this. I need to hear something positive today. There's so much negative news. You can't even get past any channel without hearing, doomsday stuff. And so I think people are really looking for something else. They need the food for the soul. They're looking for that. And so if you have a non-believer that turns on your podcast and finds you and listens to a message that changes things, it changes their perspective and allows them to open their eyes and follow Christ, and know that if they give their life to Christ, that there are just bounds of blessings waiting. And I think it's something easier that they would turn on a podcast rather than maybe a sermon, or, walk into a church building, or, turn a TV channel to a popular preacher, that they may be a little lighter in saying, well, let me listen to this podcast that is going to boost my mood and make me feel a little bit better. And maybe there's angels out there. Maybe there is a God. Let me turn this on and listen to it. How are these people touched by heaven? Let me hear this story. And so that's why, because we need avenues in any way that we can have them to reach people who do not know the Lord. They need to know him more now than ever. There is a war going on of good versus evil. And we need to win people for Christ more now than ever. And so however we can reach them, I want to support.
Thanks, Tresa. Again, what's the takeaway? Yes, God is always here. Our angels are always here, always listening. And they just seem to put an exclamation mark on that, especially with lost items, don't they? Whether you're praying to your angel, to God, Trinity, St. Anthony, big favorite, and then suddenly you hear, key falls to the floor. It's like, what? Just an exclamation mark saying, yeah, we're here. We're listening. Sometimes we're helping you with a French fry. Isn't that interesting? That was very interesting. That kind of the whole world went away. Tresa seemed to be invisible too, as well as the angel. Just the angel again making the point, I'm right here and we're going to get through this and you're okay. And let's just work through this. And her friends seeing something there. That was fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. All of it was. Thank you so much for your story, Tresa. So what's your story? Angel encounter, near-death experience, whatever it happens to be, big and little. Let me know at touchedbyheaven.net. And thank you for your support in keeping this all going through patreon.com. Our Patreon shout out this week goes to Lindsay Schlatek. Thank you, Lindsay, for your ongoing support at patreon.com. Search for Trapper Jack or come here to episode 190. And thanks for keeping us a 5-star podcast by your ratings and reviews in your podcast app. See you next week here at Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.